American politics is one of the most controversial topics that people can engage in. When something occurs in this nation, it is almost impossible for it not to be political, as it will almost always be judged through a political lens of who is wrong or who is right. Nothing exemplifies this more than January 6th. January 6th is one of the most divisive topics in American politics. Depending on who you ask, the attack on the Capitol on January 6th was an insurrection that threatened to destroy American democracy. It will be a day that will be remembered on the same pedestal as Pearl Harbor and 9/11. The people protesting outside were part of far-right extremist groups. They came armed and erected gallows outside the Capitol building in order to impose Donald Trump as supreme leader using force. Outside was Donald Trump himself, emboldening and encouraging the mob by saying, "We will never give up and we will never concede." Or you see January 6th as honest, hardworking Americans that were protesting against the globalist elites that they perceived had stolen the election from them. The protesters were not doing anything dangerous. Most of them walked around Capitol Hill, took pictures, and left. The media overplayed this by saying that this was the worst attack on American democracy since the Civil War. After all, these were people who were peacefully protesting. There were a few bad actors among the protesters who acted violently, but most of the people there were concerned citizens peacefully protesting, just like how the media described the BLM riots of 2020. These were the two different viewpoints that people had about January 6th. Most of them came from various news outlets and political spheres that people engage in. Depending on where you stand on the political spectrum, you'll have a different opinion on January 6th. However, regardless of what your opinions you have about January 6th, whether you disavow the attack on the Capitol or you understand why people were there protesting, one fact about January 6th is that it could have been way worse. On January 5th, the night before the riots, on the Capitol building, an unknown suspect planted two pipe bombs. One was located at the Republican National Committee and the other at the Democratic National Committee. The pipe bomb that was at the Republican National Committee was placed behind the building in an alleyway. The pipe bombs that were placed at the Democratic National Committee were placed near a park bench. Both bombs were placed between 7:30 and 8:30. The person who placed these bombs was covered from head to toe. They were wearing a face mask and glasses that were used to cover their entire face and eyes, along with a gray hoodie in order to cover their head, and gloves in order to cover their fingerprints. Lastly, the suspect wore jeans and gray Nike Air Max shoes. The shoes they wore were the only piece of identifying clothing that they wore. The suspect also carried a backpack with them in which each bomb was carried in. The bombs were pipe bombs that were created using household tools, such as 1x8-inch threaded galvanized pipes, end caps, kitchen timers, wires, metal clips, and most importantly, the suspect had to have some knowledge of explosives and firearms because each bomb contained homemade black powder. However, the bombs never exploded, but very much had the possibility to. A faulty timer was the only reason the bombs didn't explode. Just like how they appeared out of the darkness to plant the bombs, they faded into the darkness and disappeared, as to this day they have not been caught. Now that we know what and where, we have to ask the two most important questions. Why and who? Why would someone plant two pipe bombs outside the headquarters of the two most prominent political parties in America? There are a number of leading theories, but the two most plausible are: the first is that the bombs were supposed to explode when people were rioting in the Capitol. This would act as either a diversion or distraction from what was going on at the Capitol. Bombs were planted at both parties' headquarters in order to cause as much chaos as possible. If chaos and destruction are what the bombs would have caused, then pinning both sides against each other would have been the best possible situation, because destabilization would have occurred. The police and law enforcement present at the Capitol was very minimal that day, so having fewer cops there to help not only stop the rioters, but also help members of Congress to safety would have been stretched thin with explosives going off. Who knows how much chaos this would have caused. While the theory that these bombs were supposed to serve as a distraction, I can't help but think about how it might have had the reverse effect. On the day of January 6th, President Trump refused to deploy the National Guard in order to stop the rioters. However, having explosives go off could have convinced President Trump that the National Guard needed to be deployed, which would have resulted in the attack on the Capitol being stopped faster than it was. The second very compelling theory is that this was just a right-wing terrorist attack that was meant to target Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. She was inside the Democratic National Committee on January 6th. The only reason the bombs did not go off was because of the faulty wiring that was built into the kitchen timer. This is what I perceive to be the true intent behind the bombs, because the protesters in the Capitol were already after the current Vice President, Mike Pence. Regardless of your political stance or opinions, one thing that January 6th will be remembered by will be that Mike Pence was genuinely the only person who stood between Trump overturning the election results of 2020. And the lead up to January 6th, Trump tried everything to remain in power, including calling up state secretaries in order for him to gain extra votes in certain states. Trump settled on having Mike Pence refuse to certify all the Electoral College votes that were not for him. Every time a presidential election happens, envelopes containing the votes of each of the Electoral College of each state is opened and read aloud to Congress. Trump's plan was for Pence to refuse to do that and send the votes back to the states in order for it to be investigated for election fraud. If this did happen, then Mike Pence would have forced a contingent election, where instead of the votes of the Electoral College determining the next president, the House of Representatives would elect the next president. If a contingency election took place, Trump would have most likely won. This is why the crowd outside the Capitol viewed Mike Pence as a traitor, because he wouldn't go along with Trump's plan. The entirety of January 6th was a plan to intimidate Vice President Mike Pence into rejecting the results of the presidency, because he was standing between Trump holding on to power, thus making him a traitor. This was exemplified in the speech Trump gave on January 6, a few minutes before the Capitol was breached, where he said,
"If Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. And I hope Mike Pence comes through for us. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify. And we become president, and you are the happiest people. And Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our country. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you, I will tell you right now. And I hope Mike Pence comes through for us, I have to tell you. I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy. Of course, if he doesn't come through, I won't like him quite as much. And we're going to have to fight much harder. And Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. And if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country. Because you're sworn to uphold our Constitution.
Kids didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution.
I'm telling you what, I'm hearing the Pence just caved.
No.
Is that true?
I didn't
I'm hearing reports that Pence caved.
No
I'm
way.
telling you, if Pence caved, we're going to drag through the streets. You politicians are going to get drugged through the streets.
Yes.
I guess the hope is that there's such a show of force here that Pence will decide to do the right thing, according to Trump.
Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence!
It could have also been a combination of both. The suspect was hoping to create a diversion in order for the rioters to find Vice President Mike Pence, while the bomb took care of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. It is hard to ignore that January 6th was a failed assassination attempt on both current and elected vice presidents. The second most important question is who. Who would do this? Throughout this video, you have noticed I've used gender-neutral language to describe the suspect, because this person could be a woman, which is very likely for two reasons. One, many people would never suspect a woman could do this, thus a woman would have a better chance to get away with it, because when people commit acts like these, people just assume it is a man. The second reason is it would seem, on the video evidence, that this person has a gait that is more feminine, which leads people to believe that this is a woman, along with the mannerisms this person exhibited being more feminine. Regardless of the gender of the person, the most important factor is that this person has yet to be caught and is still free. In order to plant a pipe bomb in the most protected and surveilled city in the world, you have to be either really dumb or really smart. I believe it is the latter, that this is a very skilled and meticulous person who planned this down to the last detail. One example would be when the suspect sits down to use their phone. In the 21st century, phones are some of the most trackable devices, yet this person was smart enough to use two different burner phones so they couldn't be tracked down. Not only this, but this person also looked directly at the camera on a number of occasions. This shows that this person walked here before and did a dry run of this exact moment. They knew what they were going to do and when they were going to do it. Also, this person either had previous knowledge or studied bombs and explosives extensively, because as stated before, the suspect used homemade gunpowder. The only reason these bombs didn't explode was because of faulty wires within the kitchen timers they used. Lastly, I would like to point out that this person still, to this day, 2 years after the attack, has not been caught. This is the most frightening and dangerous part, because what is preventing this person from planning and executing another attack? Nothing. At any time they want to, this person could decide to plan another attack, and this time they might actually get it right. And as always, thank you for watching.